Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I hope wherever you are in the world right now, you're having a wonderful day. Welcome to the Spirit Side, where we look at your world from a balanced and spiritual perspective. I'm your host, Paul James Caden, and on today's show, I thought we would scale it back a little bit. A lot of podcasters are saying that it's hard to find different subjects to talk about right now. Everything is the coronavirus. Everybody's focused on the coronavirus and the quarantine life. And it doesn't seem like people are interested in much else except wanting life to get back to normal. It is a very stressful time for a lot of people. But I want to talk to you today about something a little bit more down to earth. Let's get the spirit side back in the spirit, at least for this episode. You know, sometimes when you're doing podcasting, I say this, and my wonderful co-host Stan Wangland on People Under the Stairs says the same thing, that when you're doing podcasting, it's a lot like having a talk show or a news broadcast. When things happen in our world, you talk about them. You try to bring a different perspective or a different light or keep people aware of what's going on in the world. I think for some of us, for me and Stan, and I'm sure many others, you feel a sense of responsibility to talk about these things, to try to help people, to try to give a certain perspective on issues that are happening that might be very terrible on the national scene, the local scene, the global scene. And with the pandemic, there's so much to think about. There's the economy. There's all of the false information that's out there that I've been talking about a lot here on this show. And it really can become a mind-spinning endeavor to keep up with all of this. So if you're getting a little bored with all of the coronavirus podcasts and reports, bear with us. You know, we're all doing the best that we can. We're just trying to talk about things that we've thought about, that we've noticed, that we've heard, and give our listening audience a little bit different look or angle on maybe something they haven't thought of before. Maybe it brings them comfort. Maybe it brings them peace. Maybe it helps some people. I know I've been talking a lot about the conspiracy theorists and the bad religious ideas that are out there right now, and it's helped some people, and that makes me feel good. That makes me feel like I've done my job, because for me, that's what it's all about. Sometimes it's entertainment. Most of the time it's about helping people, and that's where my passion lies. So today I'd like to talk to you all about the week of contemplation. You know, as I'm recording this podcast right now, it is Palm Sunday, and for the Christian churches, this starts Holy Week, where there is a broad array of services and celebrations, remembering the journey of Christ as he inevitably went to the cross and then into the tomb. And then on Easter Sunday, it is said that he resurrected. He came out of the tomb and appeared to those who followed him, his disciples. And after a period of time, he ascended into the heavens. Now, there's a lot in that story that I think we can all take something from. If you're a Christian, that's great. If you're not, and you follow a different spiritual path in your life, or you just try to live life the best you can, making the best decisions you can, that's fine. I hope you'll stick with the podcast because I think there's something here that we can all use, that we can all think about. And that's what I want this show to be, something that's taking us away from the coronavirus for a moment, getting out of all of that noise that's in the world. And how important is that? You know, as we're all in quarantine right now, staying in, not going out, or only going out to the necessary places like the grocery store, a lot of people are saying that they're bored, they're feeling lonely, they're tired of being around their family, they just want to get back to work, they're feeling depressed. Well, I'd like to bring something a little bit different to that idea of the quarantine life. And it's something that we don't often think about in our busy day-to-day activities, and that is this group of people in the world that we call monks or nuns. People that live their entire lives in solitude. And there are some who actually live as hermits. There is a hermetical life in many of the Christian traditions where the people or an individual will choose to stay by themselves so they can devote and concentrate on their personal relationship with God. So let's think about that for just a moment on the week of contemplation, because usually that's what it's called. When one shuts themselves away and they focus their entire life, their entire day-to-day activities on that oneness with the divine, with God. It is called the contemplative life, because they are always contemplating the greater mysteries of the universe, the ways of God, the creation of God, their place in it, what comes after this particular life. But they don't spend 24/7 doing these things. They also do things that normal people would do. They go into town, they get supplies, they do yard work, they do kitchen work, they cook, they clean. Many of them plant and tend a garden. But they also have certain times throughout their day for contemplation, meditation, and prayer. And I think during this week, what is Holy Week for many, maybe rather than sit back and bewail the situation that we're in and say, oh my gosh, here I am stuck in the house. Oh, I'm so lonely. I'm so depressed. Maybe we should start taking time to take a few lessons from the monks and the nuns, the people out there who have lived their entire lives in isolation or in very small groups. Maybe we could start to think this week how we might set up a time each day to meditate. Just to set a timer for 10, 15 minutes, 12 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you're a little more skilled at meditating, and just close your eyes and meditate. Go into the silence of your own heart. Or close your eyes and focus on the presence of the divine all around you or within you. Let your consciousness expand outside the room that you're in, outside the window, and feel that divine presence in nature and out into the cosmos. Set aside time each day for contemplation. And contemplation is really sitting and thinking, or what a lot of the monks and nuns will do is that they will read scripture, and they will read it very slowly, line by line, and they will contemplate and think about that line in scripture. What does it mean? How does it apply to them? What is the larger spiritual message that what they're reading has for themselves, for the universe, about the person of God? This is contemplation. And you could use contemplation by reading the Bible. You could read the Quran. You could read the Old Testament. You could have contemplation by reading a very beautiful piece of poetry. Or maybe even sit and read the lyrics to a favorite song that you find particularly meaningful to your life. See, again, you don't have to be religious or overly religious to partake in these practices, because these can be exercises that put us more in touch with God, whatever our particular view of that might be, or put us in touch with nature, with the cosmos, with the universe, or with ourselves, our own deeper thoughts, our soul, our heart, our mind. And another great way to engage in contemplation is through nature. One could look out of a window or step out into their front yard or go for a walk and just look at the trees and the skies and just contemplate the immense beauty and complexity of this world and this universe that we live in. And you could use that contemplation on a more scientific level or a more spiritual level, marveling at the complexity and the vastness of the creation. We could also set aside times in our day for prayer, as the monks do. If we're religious, if we're spiritual, set aside certain times each day where you pray, you talk to God, you pray for your family members, for everybody in the world, for healing. If you're not a particularly religious person, you could take that time of prayer just to have a conversation with yourself. You know, there is an old technique called self-talk. And there was an author by the name of William Hewitt who wrote a book called The Art of Self-Talk, and it's way out of print. You're lucky if you can find a copy on the planet at this particular point. But the art of self-talk was just that, talking to yourself, almost like prayer. Just sitting down in a quiet place and talking to yourself. How am I feeling? How am I feeling about what's going on? Do I feel anxious? Do I feel scared? Why? What can I do to make myself feel better? It could be something as simple as maybe I want to take a nap. Take a nap with my cat or my dog. Maybe watching a movie or listening to some music. Or maybe just calling a relative and voicing those fears and voicing those concerns. Kind of get it out of your system. But also in the art of self-talk, you can encourage yourself. Hey, this is going to be okay. I follow the rules. I stay out of crowded places. I wash my hands. I wear a face covering when I go out. I go out as little as possible. I can do the right things to greatly lower my chances of getting this virus. So you don't necessarily have to speak with God. If you do, that's great. If you're not a particularly religious person, substitute those times of prayer with the art of self-talk. Or even substitute those times of prayer by talking to your family. Sit down with your wife and kids, or whoever you might be living with if you have a family, and say, okay, how are we feeling? How's everybody doing? Are we scared? Are we nervous? How can we make ourselves feel better? See, the monks and the nuns, those who live the cloistered life in a monastery somewhere, they're very much more in tune with their feelings, with their environment, with just day-to-day life. They're not so distracted. We become so distracted. We go to work, we come home, we go to the soccer game, we put on sports, we go here, we go there. You know, we got all these things that have kept us distracted, that when life slows down, we don't even know what to do with ourselves. Even people who have a strong religious faith, they're saying, I don't know what to do with myself. I feel depressed. I feel nervous. I feel anxious. I feel like I'm bouncing off the walls. I just don't know. Now, we're all going to feel that way to a degree. But I think these practices that we're talking about here in this podcast, it brings us back down in touch with ourselves, in touch with the universe, in touch with our environment, in touch with our families who might be around us, getting back in real time and living life, because many of the monks and nuns, like Buddhist monks, they live moment to moment. They're not sitting here now thinking what they're going to do tomorrow or next week or next year, or how cluttered the day is. Even though sometimes in isolation, in the monastery, their lives are quite busy with what they have to do. So I think these practices can really start to take the edge off and start getting us back in touch with ourselves. You know, I grew up in a time where there was no internet. There were no cell phones. I loved spending time by myself, even when I was a kid. I loved to take walks, especially at sunset. When I was 13, 14, 15, I loved to meditate. I think I was introduced to a form of meditation when I was in the second grade. So how old was I then? 6, 7, 8, somewhere in that ballpark. And I was fascinated by it. I was absolutely fascinated by it. I like the quiet. I like to meditate. I like to have quiet times with God. So for me, this isn't a big deal at all. And with a little time and a little practice, you'll find that you'll start getting back to yourself, that you start enjoying your life. You start enjoying your family. You're feeling more calm. You're feeling more centered. And another great thing to do is to set aside time each day, maybe at sunset. Have story time. If you're there with your family, gather around, light a candle, make s'mores, tell stories. If you're by yourself, do the same thing. Read a story out of a book. Pull up a short story on the internet. Find one on YouTube. Download an audiobook of short stories. These are all little things that you'll find that, gee, I really enjoyed myself. That felt nice. But I think we're so out of touch with life and with ourselves and with our own hearts and our souls that we don't even think about these things. We're just lost because we don't have all of this confusion going on around us, all this hectic running to and fro. And if you implement these things, start to make them a part of your life, not something you just do now and then throw it all in the wastebasket when life picks up and gets back to whatever normal will be after this. Make these things a daily practice. Make them a part of your life. Make them a part of who you are. Because I think two of the most important lessons of Holy Week for all of us, whether we be Christians or not Christians or some other religious or spiritual path or none at all, we can still take the lesson of Christ going to the cross. You know, the Bible, the scriptures call for each and every one of us at some point in our lives to pick up our cross and follow Christ. And again, we don't have to be a religious person to do that. We can all, like Christ, go to the cross. Leave behind, die to those things that we no longer need. And that's part of the life of contemplation. Starting to look at our lives right now where we are and say, when life gets back to normal, whatever that might be after this, what do I need to change? What do I need to discard? What do I need to walk away from? What do I need to get rid of? What do I need to do better? What do I need to do that if I'm ever facing a situation like this again, that I'm not feeling so devastated or depressed or completely blindsided? How do I prepare for the experience of life? And what do I need to get rid of? What do I need to crucify or leave on the cross in order to do that? And see, this makes what we're calling the quarantine life very useful, very usable. It's a time we're taking for personal change and contemplation of bigger things beyond what we once knew as life in the world. And then beyond that, we look to the resurrection, Christ coming out of the tomb. That's newness of life, because we're all going to come out of this. We're all going to come out of our homes like Christ coming out of the tomb into the light of day. We're going to get through to the other side. But what then? Do we ascend into the heavens, metaphorically, spiritually speaking? That would be rising to a new level, living life at a new level and a new way. We're not going back to the old ways that kept us so distracted. And now we're so devastated that life has changed. We're rising to a new life, a new way, a better way. And if society doesn't do that, at least we can do that for ourselves individually. So there's resurrection, there's new life, there's rising to a higher way of life, a higher ideal. But I think also we need to look at the actual aspects of the crucifixion and the resurrection. And that is looking at the reality. One of the things to contemplate, the Buddhist monks do it. All Buddhists actually do it. Many monks and nuns do this. And that is actually in their time of contemplation, contemplate impermanence. Contemplate we're not going to be here forever. So we face our own mortality before life forces us to look at it when we're not prepared. And that's where fear comes in. That's where panic comes in. That's where despair comes in. So to contemplate going to the cross and being placed in the tomb, contemplating This world isn't forever. What's next? Because on the other side of death in the grave is new life. What comes next? New life. A spiritual life. I personally believe that there is life after death. I've done many, many, many years of study on near-death experiences, deathbed visions, the science of what these people experience when they have a near-death experience and they're resuscitated. And believe me, I've said this on the show before, but I'll say it just in case you're a newcomer or you haven't heard me say it before. There are people, there are doctors, there are nurses, there are scientists, there are neuroscientists, there are quantum physicists, people of all walks of life in the scientific community who are leaving the scientific community and joining and opening these institutes that do nothing but study consciousness and the near-death experience. And they've come to the conclusion that the general idea that just this is the phenomenon of the dying brain does not explain everything that a person sees or goes through during a near-death experience, such as the phenomenon of being outside the body, the phenomenon of thinking of their relatives, their husband, their wife, their loved ones when they were outside of the body. Then suddenly they were in the presence of that person, seeing exactly what they were doing in their homes or in the waiting room of the hospital, or what they did when they got the call at home, "You'd better come, your grandmother is dying." What they were wearing, what they said, if they were eating a salami sandwich before they walked out of the door. There's no scientific way saying this is just the dying brain to explain that. And it's happened time and time and time again with such accuracy that a person who is flatlined and died saw something that someone was doing or said and repeated it to them verbatim once they were resuscitated in the waiting room or miles away in their home. And again, that's just a tip of the iceberg. There's so many things to this phenomenon of the near-death experience. There's now institutions that study it, because some of these doctors have seen it over and over and over again, and now they're convinced there's something more to it, or they've had one themselves. So I am a true believer that we do have documented science that points to the survival of the soul or the survival of consciousness after physical death. And see, that's something to contemplate. That's something to think about. To think about when we ponder all those who passed away because of this virus. Where are they now? Is their life over? Or are they still alive and well somewhere? Are they okay? And we begin to contemplate these things and maybe study these things. Look into them ourselves, and we begin to make peace with our own mortality. Not that it might not be scary or kind of, creepy when you think about dying, or if you're told you're going to die, but you'll come to terms with it a lot more quickly when you make peace with it and understand what is probably going to happen to you when you take your last breath. Newness of life, resurrection, coming out of the tomb, consciousness coming out of the body. spirit, soul coming out of the body, rising to new life somewhere. There's so much we can do to take the sting and the fear and the depression and the uncertainty out of what is happening right now. Some people are very happy with the way the government is handling it. Some people feel like we have no leadership at all. But whichever side of the fence that you land on, you can't look to the government to bring you ultimate peace. You can't look to scientists and health officials to bring you ultimate peace. That is something that you have to obtain for yourself by really coming to terms with this thing called life and really getting back to yourself, being centered, shaking the dust of sleep from our eyes that has been put there by just being blinded by so much activity and running here, there, and everywhere in this life, in this world that we live in. And we have to ask ourselves, is this real life? Is this what I want the rest of my life to be? Or do I want a little bit of peace? Do I want a little bit of quiet? Do I want a little bit of hope? Do I want a little bit of faith? Do I want a little bit or a lot of something more than what this world has to offer? And after the quarantine life, when I come out of this tomb, is it something I'm going to take with me and continue? Because now I have something higher, something deeper, something better, something that brings me much more peace and comfort in my life that I'm not willing to let go of for the rat race and the distractions that are out there. And even in the process, if I should meet my own mortality and pass from this world, well, I'm confident that I'm still going to be okay. Because I know something that I didn't know before. I'm certain of something that I wasn't certain of before. Or I've made peace, at least, with something that I didn't have peace with before. I believe this can truly be the most important and profound Holy Easter week that each and every one of us has ever had. No matter what religion we are or no religion at all. If we take these lessons from the monks and the nuns and those who live in the monasteries and start to apply it to our lives, it will revolutionize our lives and who we are at a very deep level. And so I hope this is something that each and every one of you will take with you and implement in your lives, because it will make a difference. I appreciate you listening. As always, stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. Have a very blessed, holy week. And I'll see you next time here on the Spirit Side.